welcome here. Okay, one of the big ideas that I want to stress this evening, and honestly, if there's one thing that you're going to remember, I hope it's this, is that our mental health, our well-being, it exists on a line. Okay, what do I mean by that? If I could, I'd get you all standing, I'd probably get some duct tape, and I'd run a line down the carpet, and we'd all kind of walk this line, and I'd help us kind of feel what that's like. But it's too late for that, and we're all too tired, so I'm not going to make you do that. But what I mean by this is we are all journeying. We are all journeying. None of us have arrived, right? We all hope for health and well-being, for peace and for wholeness, right? But none of us have it all together, okay? So this idea of a line is really helpful for us tonight, because what I want us to get away from is a list of, like a checkbox list. Like it's either yes or no to everything. It's more like, okay, if this is the line, where am I on that continuum? Okay, so I'm gonna say that a few times tonight, and if you're still puzzled by the question and answer period, please ask me about it, because I really want everyone to take that home tonight. If we step back a minute and we look at the bigger picture of what it means to be human, right? Anxiety, depression, and lots of other diagnosable mental illnesses exist because of stress in our lives, right? Let's start there. So, let's talk about stress. Think about the last time you felt stressed, even if it was 5 minutes ago. Okay, think about it. And think about what that felt like in your body. Okay, so don't use feeling words, don't use thinking words, use body words. And I would invite you, if you're comfortable, to turn to the people at your table and just share some of the physical experience of stress. Now, do you think that you could probably sub out what you're stressed about and you'd still get that same physical reaction? Generally speaking, okay. So, there's certain things that are going to make us more stressed, right? And so we might get more of that physical reaction. But in general, you can kind of swap out what it is we're stressed about, and we're going to feel it in our bodies, right? It will have a pattern of how it hits us physically, okay? Now, usually when we get that feeling, we misattribute what's going on. What that means is we mix up what's going on, right? So when I feel stressed, sometimes I think that it's someone else's fault. Anyone get that? Anyone get that thought? Yeah. Yes. And so, once we start that dance, it's really hard to slow it down and turn that ship around. So what's interesting is when we slow down and get to know our stress selves, we actually can gain a lot of information, okay? Which is really interesting, and I'd love to do a whole workshop on that, but today we're talking about something different. So I just want to highlight and normalize stress. We all feel it. It can sometimes overcome us, right? But there are tools that we can learn to manage it, all right, and ride the waves. Now, stress comes from 4 main sources. This is a time for those who are really good students. The prompt is that's the very top of your handout if you want to fill it in, but no pressure. So 4 main sources. The first one would be environment changes. Changes in your environment, right? If you move, if you get a new job, frankly, I feel stressed if I have to find a new grocery store. That's stressful to me, right? Yeah, prices go up, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, now I got to change my whole routine, right? So any kind of environment change, that can cause stress. Number 2, social pressures. Our relationships cause us stress. There's a lot that goes on in our relationships that are hard, right? And we have to navigate that. Number 3, our physiological responses to situations. Okay. So what that means is what our bodies pick up, whether or not it's true. And I'll get more into that. But, a good example of this is I used to work in addictions as a music therapist. And I would have a lot of folks that I'd work with who couldn't listen to certain genres of music. Not because it was familiar to them, they didn't know that particular song, but if they listened to the blues or if they listened to hard rock, it would trigger them to drink or use their substance, right? There's something about our bodies knowing, right? They know before we know sometimes, right? That there's something happening in the situation that could be dangerous or, could be, pull us into doing something. And so sometimes that can cause stress. And number 4, our thoughts or our interpretations. So I like to think of interpretations as a pair of glasses, right? You and I wear different glasses. We could be in the exact same room, depending on how many scratches are in my glasses. I could be seeing something completely different, right? So that's how we interpret a situation. So stress is normal. Stress is normal. It comes mainly from these 4 sources, okay? Which are things we can't avoid, by the way. I wish I could just tell you, do X, Y, and Z and you'll never have to feel stress. Unfortunately, I would be, I think, a bajillionaire if I could say that, and I can't. So it's just normal. It is our response to change or challenge, and it can really throw us off. Now, we've talked about some symptoms here of stress, and the reason that's important is because left unchecked, stress can lead to anxiety and depression. Okay. So now if you turn the page in your handout, you'll see a long list. There's all kinds of things that can happen when we're stressed. Anxiety. Now, this isn't an exhaustive list, okay? This is just suggestive. There's lots more I could have put on here. Anxiety, depression, panic attacks, sadness, increased substance use, increased gambling, overeating or undereating, compulsive behavior, smoking, chronic stress. What that means is stress that's left unchecked and lasts a really, really, really long time can lead to changes in your immune system, digestive system, and cardiovascular system, your ticker, right? Yeah. Your reproductive system, lead to a host of mental health issues and relational issues, by the way. And then we talked about physical symptoms. So if nothing else, hopefully now you're starting to see how we all live on this line of humanity, right? We're all trying to navigate being well as we can, right? Some of us, it changes day by day, right? We might wake up feeling like I'm over here, I'm feeling like I'm towards ease today. And the next day we might wake up feeling I'm more towards disease today, and then we're kind of just always on that line, yeah? Okay. Now, I'd like to show you a video. I'd like to show you a clip of a piece of curriculum put out by Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries. They're an organization, actually their CEO was a neighbor of mine when I lived in Vancouver. They're a really cool group, and they're doing something that not a lot of people are doing, which is trying to educate the church about mental health. Because there are some particular things in churches, and we don't talk about it a lot. I love that your church here, even if it's not your home church, that there is a church offering a workshop like this tonight. That's awesome. But historically, that hasn't happened. And so I just wanted you to see a clip from this awesome group doing great work.
My anxiety got so high that it turned into depression. Anxiety and depression, they're different, but they have a close relationship. Anxiety is like the fear of terrible things that are about to happen or going to happen in the future. And depression is the feeling of those terrible things are already here. They've already arrived. It's done. My anxiety would get so high that it would tip into depression. And that's happened many times throughout my adult life, going back into like a dip of depression and not knowing what to do with it, and kind of functioning somewhat, and then eventually it just kind of goes away and, oh yay, I'm better, and then hopefully that never happens again. But it wasn't until recently a number of things changed at work that increased my stress so much that I remember one day I was standing in my office and it was like my brain was just going like crazy. Your mind's eye is just spinning out of control, and my brain just said enough. My brain just powered down. I could not think anymore. I could not try and project plan anymore, prioritize anymore. In fact, for the next 2 weeks, if I started to try and think about a task list, would instantly get a headache. Because of that, and through the help of a few of my colleagues and friends who encouraged me to take time off, I took time off work. That was when I first connected with a psychologist who first put a name to what was going on in my body and my mind. And she finally, in one session, listening to me tell my story and listening to how I think, described both the diagnosis and mirrored back to me the way that my patterns of thinking had been going on for years. It was huge. It was both scary, but I think much more than that, a relief, because somebody didn't just understand. They were describing the way that I have always thought in language I could have never come up with. I could have never put words to it like she did. There's a reason for this. There's an explanation for it. And there's actually a path to learning how to not let this ruin your life.
The biopsychosocial spiritual model is one that's just in almost every psychology, psychiatric textbook. And really, it tries to break down human existence or human experience into 4 dimensions. Biologically, so one's genetics, the presence or absence of medical illness, and that sort of thing will be what we think of in terms of one's biology. Psychologically, we tend to think mostly in terms of thoughts and emotions, cognitions, affective dimensions. And then sociologically or socially, we tend to think of one's relationships, so family, culture, the city, the society we live in, et cetera, et cetera. And then spiritually, well, for Christians, it means our relationship with God.
Christians experience mental illnesses in the same way that Christians experience heart failure, kidney failure, broken bones. Our minds are a part of our bodies. There's a physiological reality impacting your mind. It doesn't mean that somehow you're lacking faith. It just means that our bodies are broken and they decay, and we experience that in different ways, that they're not perfect. Whatever mental illness someone may have, it's not a reflection of their faith. I've met profoundly faithful Christians who are wrestling through acute mental health issues, and it's the hand they were dealt. It's part of their physiology. And we pray for healing, absolutely. I'm going to pray for that in hope with them. But we understand that if not now, when Christ establishes kingdom, come, and we'll rejoice then at that answered prayer. But for now, it's really important that Christians understand that if you have a mental health issue, it's not because of a lack of faith. It's just a part of being alive in a broken creation.
For a large season of my life, my relationship with God was probably characterized by my need for God to rescue me from the darkness. Wondering, is he real? Is any of this real? Will he ever actually rescue me? And then on occasion, hearing his voice, some kind of light breaking in. Only on occasion. It's the most frustrating thing. As I've learned more about how my mind works and about mental health, it's probably made my relationship with God more complicated in some ways. When you start to question your own mind's interpretation of reality, realizing my mind has been like playing games on me. My mind has been construing reality in these negative ways. Well, all of a sudden, what about all the good things that I believed about God and felt about God? Or the things that I interpreted as God? How do I know that those things are real? How can I have certainty? One of the things that I think contributed to part of my obsessional thinking being about faith is going to a school that had a culture where it was like faith is about being absolutely certain what you believe in and going out and preaching it to everybody else. And it instilled in me this fear of, if I have a doubt, I'm not an authentic believer. I'm not a true Christian. And so part of the obsessional thinking has been about constantly scanning for signs that I'm not a true Christian, that I don't truly believe in God, that I'm somehow a heretic or a non-believer, or whatever you want to call it, that I'm bad. I think dealing with this condition has changed the nature of faith for me. Faith is not primarily about being certain of my beliefs. Faith is primarily about opening up my heart, that deepest part of your soul, to the possibility of God, and refusing to close off that place in your heart, and waiting for God there. And at times experiencing Him enough that you realize He is there. He is there.
Well, lament is when you cry to God and really complain with all your heart and soul that this is not right, this is not a fair thing. And it's interesting that there's more psalms of lament in the book of Psalms than any other kind of psalm. In other words, there's a language for sadness that God gives us in and through the psalms. And the key thing is, if you think about the way that lament works, take a psalm like Psalm 13, right? It begins with a big outburst of anger and frustration. God seems to have broken the covenant. God seems not to have done what's happened. This person's been damaged. The enemy seems to be worse. It's really very, very, very powerful sometimes. But then in most of the Psalms, not all of the Psalms, you come to a middle section where something seems to have changed. The psalmist sees things from a different angle and recognizes God's unending love in the midst of this situation. The situation is not transformed, but the hope is introduced. And then the psalmist can go on and praise. Now, not all lament psalms run like that. Some of them run like Psalm 88 ends, "Darkness is my only companion," full stop. And you think, wow, that's pretty dark. Until you realized, first of all, that's sometimes how people feel. But secondly, that the psalmist is talking to God. So it's a prayer. It's not like the psalmist is saying, "You don't exist, God." He's just saying, "I can't reach you."
Now that clip covered a lot of ground. First, I would encourage you in your table groups to just reflect on Matthew's story. He talked about experiencing both anxiety and depression, that his anxiety would get so bad. I don't know if you heard how he described it. His mind's eye would be working, right? And he'd be thinking, and it would tip. Did you hear him say that? It tipped into depression. Okay, so Matthew talks about both anxiety and depression. So I'm just going to run through some of the causes, symptoms, and treatments for each of these challenges. And then I'm going to try to put them into a framework for you that has a lot of lines, which is our theme tonight, right lines. Okay. So let's start with anxiety. I think that's first on your worksheet too. Yeah. Feel free to write any notes that you feel like would be helpful for you. Anxiety. It is a normal reaction, actually. It's actually very helpful. How many of you have been in nature and have happened upon a very large animal? Anyone? So anxiety is that thing that's connected to a really important system in your brain that shuts down all thinking and tells you to run, right? It depends on what animal, that's right. Depends on what animal. But usually it will give you a lot of adrenaline, right? It'll help you do things very quickly, right? Or it'll help you play dead, right? So what we find in anxiety is it's playing off that same system of arousal. It's either going to make you hyper aroused, or everything's going really fast, or it's going to make you numb. So if that starts to happen, that's a little flag, right? Oh, okay. This might be kind of growing bigger, out of control, right? It's not really matching the situation. In kids, this can be age inappropriate responses. Okay, and I'm not really going to deal with kids tonight, but just so you know, there are developmental markers of anxiety as well. And it's when the anxiety or the worry or the fear is just getting in the way of you living your life, right? If you're not able to do the things that you used to do or that you want to do because of the anxiety, that would be another flag, right? Oh, okay, this is really getting in the way. I might need some help. The first step is to see your family doctor if you have one, or go to the walk-in clinic and see a doctor. And a lot of physicians who are family physicians will have screening tools right there in their office. You can take a quick kind of questionnaire and they can kind of get you started. They can also refer you to a psychiatrist or a psychologist that can be covered under OHIP, which is really nice. You can always call up a psychologist yourself. You'll get an appointment a lot faster, but you'll pay a lot of money. So it really just depends, okay? But the cheapest route is to go through your family doctor. Treatment usually involves therapy and sometimes involves therapy and medication. Now, for self-help, so if you're kind of starting to feel like, if we're talking about a line, it's not getting in the way, like in the way of my daily functioning, but it's just a bother. Like I really kind of want to face this. I want to look at this. Maybe I'm a little bit worried, more than I realized. Maybe I have this kind of anxiety creeping up. Well, there's lots of things you can do to kind of start the process yourself. Learning more about it. Okay, so there's scads of books, so many books written on this. Joining a support group can be really helpful. Learning about other people's journeys. Believe it or not, avoiding caffeine can be helpful. Or limiting. I know, I'm sorry. I know, it's so great, isn't it? But it can often exacerbate anxiety, okay? You can learn some tools like, I have this in my office, but it's just a workbook. You can kind of go to Chapters or go to a thrift store. You can start looking, for this kind of a thing. The library probably has a bunch of these. And then just do like chapter by chapter. Take it as slow or as fast as you want. You learn new tools. You'll probably learn a lot, actually. And you can take it at your own pace. And also reminding yourself that it's okay. You're not alone. Like lots of people deal with this. I think a lot of folks feel ashamed, and it's too bad because it really cuts them off from getting the help they need. Yeah, so you're not alone. Like it's totally, totally within the range of normal human experience to deal with anxiety. And we all need help with something, right? So for some of us, this is it. Okay, so again, I could talk at length about anxiety, but that's my spiel on anxiety. Now in terms of depression, again, it's on that same line, okay? But instead of being, that kind of over-arousal, right? Overthinking, everything is happening really fast. I'm probably not eating as much because everything's fast. I'm rushing here, rushing there. Worried about this, can't sleep, all that. Now it's, I can't get out of bed, right? I actually can't feel very much. And life, the things that used to appeal to me don't appeal to me anymore. It just doesn't sound good. I'm just going to stay in bed, right? So it's on that same line, but now we're kind of at the other end, which is depression. And, this can really be marked by what we would expect in sadness, but to an extreme, right? So let's think about what sadness feels like. Sadness feels like something's missing, someone's missing, something's lost, right? I don't feel like being around a lot of people because I'm sad, right? Depression is kind of like that, but times 20, right? Like it's kind of like way on the other side of sadness. And it's really marked by losing motivation, energy, interest, and it kind of wrecks our daily lifestyle, right? Really gets in the way. It can cause a lot of issues with thinking, memory, eating and sleeping. Sometimes there is a moment when it starts, and you can think back, oh yeah, this started after this, right? That's when I started to feel depressed. Other times, we're not so lucky, and we don't know why it came on, right? And it just comes on without a word, and there it is. We're depressed, right? Okay, so, sometimes in depression, it's actually, there's an angry part to it too. We can be very easily frustrated. Sometimes we eat too much or too little. We sleep too much or too little, but generally we have a low energy. It can be very hard to concentrate and make decisions, remember things. May have headaches, might have thoughts of self-harm or suicide, right? And if that happens, I would encourage you to reach out, right? It's very normal to experience suicidal thoughts, but you need help if that's happening, right? So finding a therapist to work with, or if you're not safe right in that moment, calling 911 and getting yourself safe. At least getting yourself to the ER, right? But being at the end of our rope when our life has changed that much, right? It makes sense that we're kind of feeling like we need the pain to stop, right? So for some of us, those thoughts actually come and go more often than we'd like to admit. Now, there's lots of reasons for depression. I actually, I hope it's okay I'm saying this, but as a Christian, have been taught all kinds of things that maybe are from older generations about depression and faith. And actually, I had a girlfriend who had postpartum depression and was told by her entire community that she didn't have enough faith, right? She wasn't praying hard enough, that she didn't love her baby enough. Yeah. And I remember just being so sad for her. So what we know now is that depression is caused by brain chemistry. It's a chemical issue. It is happening in the brain. It is not voluntary. Okay, we don't want to be depressed. It is not willful or a lack of faith or anything like that. There are genetic markers for depression. Okay, so sometimes it runs in families. And it's usually exacerbated or turned on during or after a stressful life event. There can be medical conditions that predispose us to depression. There can be medication that predispose us to depression. So there's lots of reasons. And and hopefully you heard in the film clip too, a lot of us might have grown up thinking that mental illness was a lack of faith, but that's not the whole story. And we can look to the Psalms to see why. All right, so professional help. The important thing with depression is getting it soon. Okay, so getting it as early as you can. Okay? Some of us experience seasonal mood shifts. Even that, like getting in to see your physician as early as you can, because there's lots of things that you can do to help, even seasonal depression, right? Tons of things we now know that I wish I could have told my grandparents, right, and my great-grandparents, but we didn't know it then. We know it now. So it's great to get help as soon as you can. Usually treatment is with therapy, often medication. Sometimes some complementary medicine can be helpful, but you have to talk to your physician about that and your psychiatrist, whoever's diagnosing you. If you start a treatment, okay, and it's not working as well as you'd like, go back to your doctor. That is so normal. Antidepressant medication has this way of not quite getting it right the first time. So it's good to titrate it, have to go back and see what's working for you and your body, okay? Yes, and then self-help. So if you're either you've already been diagnosed with depression and you'd like to try to maintain, right, your mood, not let it dip quite as low. Or if you're kind of sensing, yeah, it's winter blues, like I'm starting to kind of feel lower and I want to kind of get proactive about that, there's some self-help I would recommend. A regular exercise. That's especially hard when it's this snowy, but it's possible, you know, especially with all kinds of online videos and things now. As best of sleep as you can. A balanced diet. Avoiding alcohol because it's a depressant, right? So it's going to get you low. Spending time with people, especially people you care about, but people, right? When we're with people, it really helps us stay grounded. Managing stress, right? That stress I talked about, make sure you stay on your stress, yeah? If you kind of sense your stress levels rising, right? Doing something about it, not just ignoring it. Reminding yourself that you're not alone. So again, just a big whoosh of depression lists, symptoms, and causes and treatment. There's other books too that you can find. Lots of places, workbooks to help you with your mood, right? If you find your mood gets low. So that's another self-help resource for you. Let me just finish this evening by showing you, this is kind of what I mean by a line. Okay, again, this is the big idea tonight, right? We're all on this line, and it changes. Now, you'll see here that this is a chart put forward by the Government of Canada, and it's the mental health continuum model. So on one end, we see healthy, and on the other end, we see ill. Now, they've only put two things in between. I'd like to suggest that there's about 999.9 points in between, right? That we're not just 4 boxes, but there's actually all kinds of variations here. But it could be helpful sometimes to read a list. Okay, so if I'm healthy, you know, in my sleep, this is what this would look like. If I'm reacting, this is what this would look like. If I'm injured, this is what this would look like. And we're all somewhere on here. None of us are going to get a perfect score all down the left, you know? That's the point of the line. We are all on this journey. It is a human journey. And what I hope is that each of you find the support that you need to help you or the ones that you love navigate anxiety and depression. And stress.